Hi everybody, this is the Cricket Badger podcast.
Each badger marks the track with its own scent.
His black legs are short but very powerful for digging. The name badger probably comes from the French word bêcher, meaning digger.
I'll talk over the end of the music because we're here for another Cricket Badger podcast 2023. It's the first time we did one a couple of days ago. We're back in sync for Cricket Badger podcast. We had the World Cups and things at the end of last year, which meant I took a couple of months off. But we're back now, and the Cricket Badger podcast sponsored by manscaped.com for the best in male grooming. Quote Badger. With your order, and you get 20% off and free shipping. So there's the housework done. Lydia Greenway is with me on the podcast today. It's a great pleasure to have you on, Lydia. How are you?
Hi, James. Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Yeah, currently in sunny South Africa, which is nice for the Under-19s World Cup. And yeah, hearing that it's a bit chilly back home. So
if I was to take my laptop and point it out of my window, you'd see white on the floor, and it's horrible. It's horrible. Yeah, okay, I've got the heating on, and basically in these times doesn't happen unless you really need it. So I'm trying to keep warm. But it's very good to have you on the Cricket Badger podcast. I've wanted to have you on for a while. You've got a book out as well, Women and Girls Cricket: How We Can Grow the Game Together. And that is, 225 caps, I think, in total for England during your career between 2003 and 2016. You've gone into coaching. You've gone into the media now. You're out in South Africa at the moment covering that competition. And you've got your book out as well. So busy times.
Yeah, really busy. It's the book, I'm just relieved it's done. It's taken a while. It's taken about 3 years to get it done. Started during the first lockdown during COVID, and it's been really enjoyed doing it. Pleased it's done, and just more than anything, I hope it helps a lot of people, because as you know, I think the women and girls space is growing, and it's got huge potential. So I'm excited to hopefully make sure that book can help people getting involved in the game.
I've written a few books, and they always seem a really good idea when you start off with them. And then you get about halfway through and you think, why have I started doing this? But then when you get the box through the post and you open it up and you see the finished product, it's actually quite a proud little moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so nice because exactly right. When you have that physical copy in your hand, because all you ever see leading up to that, as you know, is the manuscript, and you can't really comprehend how this document on your computer is going to suddenly be turned into a book. So it's a lovely feeling when you finally get it through, that's for sure.
I can remember thinking, how many words I've got so far? How many more do I need? Oh, can I do this? I don't want to do this anymore. Anyway, but that's that. You're going to take on the Cricket Badger 20 questions today. We'll refer to your book as we go through. But as I said to you just before we pressed go live, some are frivolous, some are a bit stupid, some are more serious. And we'll start off with one which kind of just eases us into the cricket chat. And that's why cricket? What is it about cricket that kind of turned you on, I guess, and made you love it?
Yeah, I think, for a lot of females my age, they probably have a really similar story, and it's often a male relative gets you involved in the game, and that was the case for me. So my dad played at our local cricket club, so that was Hayes in Kent. And our weekends, I'm sure all our listeners can relate to this. You just spend the whole weekend up at your local cricket club. So for young children, I've got a younger brother and an older sister, and we just roamed the grounds of the cricket clubs. We were building camps and then, causing mischief. But then as we got a bit older, we actually started to take a bit more interest in the cricket. So instead of building the camps, we then progress into the cricket nets, and really informally, there was nothing, no sort of coaching or anything. And then I think the interest grew from there, and started playing competitively, but only ever boys cricket, because yeah, as you probably know, back in the 90s, that was really the only option. If you were a young girl wanting to play, that was your only option. And unfortunately, but also a bit fortunately as well, because I think it toughens you up a bit.
I had Charlotte Edwards on a couple of years probably ago now. Time flies, isn't it? But the she was saying that same kind of process as you, I think, but it's quite tough. I think I got the impression from Charlotte it's not easy because you kind of playing boys cricket. You're expected to be a certain way. There's a stereotype, certainly in those times, about what a women's cricketer was going to be. So it's not necessarily the easiest path.
No, it's not. And I think, I mean, when you look back, I think as a child, when you're younger, you don't often think about the things that are challenging at the time. So you could be going through something and you never really question it. So, you know, I'm sure Charlotte would have spoken about when she turned up to cricket matches, and as the only girl, you're sort of sent to a toilet cubicle to go and get changed to then meet your team out on the pitch. You know, comments from opposition who don't necessarily think a girl should be playing in a boys' team, umpires who give you out when you're not out because you're a girl, all those sorts of things. And yeah, you just don't see, you know, you don't see what's happening at the time. I think your parents are aware of it. But then I think it's only now when you start to look back and you think, actually, that probably toughened me up a bit, you know, when you go through all those sorts of things.
We've had a few podcasts ago, back in October, we had the ladies from Say No to Sexism on, and I think it's still kind of relevant now. You know, those debates are still relevant now. You know, you kind of, I think one of the ladies said that at 13 she was getting sort of sexual comments on the pitch from males and stuff like that. So women, there is a little bit of misogyny in cricket still, isn't there?
Yeah, I think there is, and I think that's the case in society, really. I think it's cricket, and I think sport is a reflection of society and what's going on in the community. So I think, you know, they're no different. The issues that we face in cricket, I don't think are any different to what we still face in society at the moment as well. And I guess it just takes a bit of time for change, but I think what I've seen is a lot of promising stuff. So with our family friends who have been to, say, for that example, the 100 games, they've got young teenage boys who they're 18 years old and they want to watch the women's games as much as they want to watch the men's games. And I think, you know, that next generation of young people, I think, are coming through with a much more open-minded and that's, you know, that's what we want, isn't it? Not just for women, but for any, I guess, minority group, if you like.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I've watched women's cricket for a while now, but I think the skill levels are fantastic, and they're getting better all the time, aren't they? It's just, I mean, I see comments on Twitter from people saying, "Oh, I'm not watching that; it's slow. It's, you know, they're not as fast as the men," and that kind of. I think you just got to take it as a different product, haven't you? You can't just kind of. The comparisons are dangerous, aren't they? If you compare the men to the women.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're exactly right. They are different games. You know, if you're turning up to watch a women's game and you're expecting to see the ball be bowled 90 miles an hour, then you are at the wrong type of cricket. But if you're there to appreciate, you know, high levels of skills, good technique, fitness levels, tactical awareness, all the stuff that comes with the game of cricket, then you'll get that in the women's game. And you know, it's only the players are getting better because they're given more opportunity. Historically, well, going way back when, you know, women haven't been allowed to play the game of cricket. So you know, naturally there is a bit of catching up to do because the investment hasn't always been there. But as we know now, the investment is coming and the product is only ever going to get better. And yeah, that's what excites me, because I don't think we're even scratching the surface now.
The women's football success at the Euros last year as well. I get the impression probably in about 10 years' time there's going to be a fantastic women's football team, because there's going to be a lot of young girls inspired to play. But that possibly has knock-on effects to cricket as well, that, you know, young girls see sport as being an option.
Yeah, 100%. I was there at the final, actually, watching the Lionesses, and I tell you, it was unbelievable. The feeling that I had was, I think I put a tweet out, and it just felt like you found your tribe, because when you looked around the ground, it was young girls, older women, and suddenly they're given an opportunity to go and watch people like them. Because of course we've been offered mainly men's sport, which is great because it's sport. It doesn't matter about the gender, but that is all we've been offered for a long time in terms of in the media, TV, radio, all that sort of stuff. But I think the Lionesses and their success and the fact that the personalities came through so much as well. I can only imagine the amount of young girls who are now asking their parents they want a football because of what they did. And yeah, it gave me goosebumps watching that final and seeing them do the lap round the ground afterwards. It was amazing.
I'm probably going to misquote that phrase, but it's that if you can see it, you can be it, or whatever it is, isn't it? Whereas
Yes,
if you've got your role models, you want to be them.
Yeah, definitely. And that's again, it's you don't know what you don't know. So when you're younger, you just take it that you only see men playing sport, but then suddenly when you're given a female playing sport, suddenly it just gives you the young girls an extra boost. And then like you say, it just opens up so many more opportunities. And I'm sure football will be even bigger than it is now in our country.
If it hadn't been cricket, where would you have gone with your life? I mean, when you started out, did you have to have a job and stuff like that to support yourself? Because you weren't full time then, I guess.
Yeah, we did. So I made my debut back in 2003, and I was subsidising my playing career by coaching. We had a little bit of lottery funding, and when I say a little bit, I think it was maybe a few £100s to cover our travel and things like that. And that's where I think the game probably lost quite a lot of young girls because there wasn't that genuine pathway progression in terms of a career. And then it wasn't until a few years later where the Chance to Shine contracts came in. So I don't know how familiar people will be with that, but the England team were working in partnership with Chance to Shine, which is a cricketing charity, and they sort of provided our income. We would go out and coach in schools, and then they would give us the flexibility when it came to an England tour. They'd say, right, you can go off and play there now. So that was a sort of an in-between, a bridging point really between the amateur game and then us moving into professionalism in, I think it was 2014.
So it's always been cricket then with you. If cricket hadn't existed, where would you have gone?
I don't know, to be honest. I always enjoyed hockey. That was my sort of big second sport, which I played just to club level. So I guess I wonder if I could have given that a crack where I would have got to. In terms of if I had to have got another job, I have no idea. Maybe a police officer or a teacher. I don't really know. So yeah, I'm just grateful that cricket worked out, to be honest.
Who has been the biggest influence on your cricket career?
My dad, yeah, without a doubt. I think he was the one who was giving me throwdowns at a young age, accepting when I got into a bit of a mood and sulked when I hadn't had a good session. So he was obviously my very first coach. But then throughout there, he's always been that, I guess, the sounding board that I'd be able to chat to. So without a doubt, it would be him.
If I could let you relive 24 hours from your cricketing life again, special day that you want to kind of feel the highs and the smiles from again, where would you go?
Yes. Oh, well, the one that's come straight to my mind is when we won the Ashes back in 2005, obviously the same year that the men had won it. The reason I'm picking that one isn't because of what happened. Well, of course, it's what's happened on the pitch, but it was what came after. Obviously, the parade through London on the double-decker buses and the celebrations the night before. All of those things was unbelievable. But it was quite funny because even then, the women's game wasn't in the mainstream media. And so, people who would have seen that parade through London, it was the men first in that big red double-decker bus, and then we were behind them. And you could hear the people who were lining the streets as we went by there was a bit of confusion as to who we were, and I heard someone say, "Oh, they're the wives and girlfriends." And if I'm honest, we didn't mind. We were having a great time. And then we got down into Trafalgar Square, but before we turned the corner, we could hear the singing. We could hear Jerusalem being sung. And as we turned the corner and, we saw Trafalgar Square for the first time, people in the fountains, I think my brother was one of them, and everything that came with that. I think that was just something that that will stay with me for a long, long time.
The flip side of the question: if there's a day that you don't want to relive again, what's the worst? What's the worst memory?
Oh, I think when we've missed out on World Cups, I think that's when you do all the hard work and you get to a big final or a semi-final. I remember one in particular, it was out in the West Indies. I think it was a T20 World Cup. And for anyone who's had that disappointment of losing a big, big game, there's nothing that can be said to change the mood in the changing room. When everyone's back in that changing room, it's just a horrible, horrible silence. No one knows what to say and no one knows what to do. And you just sat there for however long, a decent amount of time. And they are always horrible, horrible feelings, because it's another opportunity missed, which is always hard to take.
I don't know if you watched the World Cup final, but the French team obviously lost, and then there was President Macron, and went into the French players' dressing room afterwards, and he was giving this impassioned speech where he's clapping his hands together and telling them how proud he was of them, and they were just sat there, and they didn't want him there at all. You could see it made no difference to them.
It's all in the timing, isn't it? That is the worst time that you can go up and try and console anyone who's just had that dream slip away from them.
Who was your cricketing hero when you were a youngster coming through and discovering the love of the game?
Oh, she always cringes when I say it because we're really good friends, but Charlotte Edwards. So from a young age, we played together. From, I think, 14 was when I made my Kent senior women's debut. And she was actually our captain. But she taught me so much about the game. And I got to just watch her and how she went about her business, the discipline that she had, the drive, the motivation, but also the time that she had for other people as well. She would be the last one to leave training, not just if it's her training, but if she was needed to throw balls at other people. Without a doubt, it would be Lottie.
Right, this could be a man or a woman as your answer to this one, but if I could let you jump into the skin of somebody else for a day, a current player, you can have their skills, you can have their life, you can have everything that goes with it, but you can be that player for 24 hours. Who would you choose?
Good question. Two names have sprung to mind. The first one was Jos Buttler. I think from a mentality point of view, I've never seen him flustered, and I would love to know what his thought processes are, how he remains so calm, the decision-making process that he goes through as well. I'd love to be able to just understand that. And then the second one, I know you only said one, but the second one that came to mind was Ben Stokes. Probably for obvious reasons. A lot of people, I'm sure, would be keen to understand what makes him tick, and especially the way that the men's team are playing at the moment. So, that they'd be the two. And then I think the third, I'm breaking all rules here from a women's point of view. I think Meg Lanning, for a similar reason of Jos Buttler. She's very calm under pressure and a great tactician as well.
I'll just let you carry on. We'll have an 11. Right, your book. We'll get back to that because I'm going to ask you a question now. But I'm going to just read out a couple of paragraphs off the off the Amazon site, actually, because it's available on
Yeah.
Amazon and probably in everywhere else as well. And for many decades, women and girls cricket has been underrepresented, underfinanced, undervalued, and lacking in true organisation. Despite this, many thousands of female players over the years have fought against the barriers, developed their skills, and fallen in love with this incredible sport. Recent years have seen an explosion of female participation, broadcast coverage, new teams, new clubs, new competitions, and an undeniable sense that women and girls cricket is establishing itself as the most significant growth area of the game. We've seen full houses at Lords and the MCG. We've seen the success of the 100, the Women's Big Bash, the prospect of a women's IPL, and most importantly, thousands of new players across the world benefiting from everything cricket has to offer. What is needed now is to build on these successes, to provide resources and information for clubs, schools, and coaches to start to grow and to coach their own programs. This book is the answer, is the bold claim at the end of that. The next question on the next question was, I'm going to put you in charge of world cricket for the day. What one thing, or if your previous answer was anything to go, what three things would you change or introduce into the game to make it better? I mean, going back to your book, I mean, if you could actually encapsulate all of your book with three things that cricket could do to make cricket better for girls, for women, what would your answer be?
I think funding, investment, I think for nations who aren't at a place where the likes of England, Australia, soon to be India as well, who will be in that three, obviously with the women's IPL, I would love to see the sort of top 8, at least for now, have a really robust domestic structure, because that's not in place at the moment. When you look at countries like the West Indies and South Africa, there's no foundations underneath their setup. So that means that you have to get lucky with what players you have coming through. So to a certain extent, if you think of South Africa, their players have got better because they've played in the leagues around the world. They haven't got better because of their structure. So I'd love to see that come into play much sooner for the teams, because at the moment it's a little bit boring. Australia are just winning everything. So I'd love for an even playing field to be created.
And as English people, with all due respect to any Australians watching this, we don't like that, do we?
No, we don't. We absolutely don't. I mean, it's great because they play amazing cricket and they are brilliant at what they do. But I think to maintain interest, you have to have a level of competition, and it can't just be 3 or 4 teams who are always going to be in the semi-finals. It has to be, at least 8 sides who are able to push each other. So, yeah, that's why I think that domestic structure underneath is so important.
If you were starting your career again today as a youngster, is there anything you'd do differently? And what would the 12-year-old say? 12-year-old you say to the current you? Would you be? What would that 12-year-old think of where you've taken yourself?
Oh gosh, I suppose when I look back on my career, I would have liked to have been a bit braver at times. I think in playing the game of cricket, and I think when you're brought up playing the game, obviously you're taught to play it in the right way. So correctly, your wicket is so valuable. Yeah. But I think when you see the way that the game's being played now, and you see when the fear of failure is removed or the consequence of being out is removed, it breaks the shackles. And I would have loved to have been given a good go to have played in that sort of mindset, because it's amazing what can be done, I think, when you see players who are doing it and playing it that way.
I'll tell you what, that really resonates with me. I mean, I am just a humble cricketer, club cricketer, but when I was at school, all I was thinking about was playing in the V and like forward defensive. That was what you were coached, and sell your wicket dear and all that kind of stuff. And then I used to see these kids come in at number 8 who didn't really care about cricket, and I did, and they'd slog across the line and get the same amount of runs in about 4 balls. And I used, if I could go back now to the kind of like 11-year-old me, I'd try and be a lot more flamboyant and just go for it. And I can really, it really resonates what you say.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I try and do now when I go into schools or a club and coach, if we're doing a training drill, I try and just take the stumps out of it. So if they're batting and they're in a net that boulders are there, depending on what the session is, just taking away the stumps, it's amazing. Suddenly the batters just suddenly are freed up. So yeah, it's taken away that consequence, because as a batter, you're always going to get out, aren't you? But I suppose it's what you do when you're in there. So you may as well give it a good crack.
What would the 12-year-old you then say to the current you? Would little Lydia be proud of where you've gone?
I thought, oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, yeah, I've been very lucky to have had a decent international career and have been able to travel as well. So I guess it's not always the things that are the stats and the number of caps. I think it's the person experience as well. So experience different cultures. If I didn't play cricket, I wouldn't have gone to places like India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Australia, New Zealand. Like, just wouldn't have gone to those places. And so I think it makes you a bit more, much more open-minded, I think, to different cultures, different ways of living. And so I think, more than anything, I think hopefully my younger self will be appreciative of having experienced those things as well.
Having your passport stamped quite a few times as you've travelled around the world. Right, next question. They say rock stars want to be sportsmen and vice versa. Sports stars want to be rock stars. If you could have been successful, famous, doing something else, what would you have liked to have done?
Oh, the rock star element sounds good. Maybe, famous doing something else. Well, I guess playing another sport, that's a bit boring, isn't it? It's a similar sort of thing. But yeah, maybe an international hockey player. I would have loved to have, seen how far I could have gone with that. I don't know if I would have made it, but I think experiencing that would have been good.
Right, we're on to the more frivolous questions now. If you could meet anybody, this is a kind of dinner party question. If you could meet anybody living or dead, who would you like to meet? I'll give you 3 guests to have around your dinner table.
Okay. So whenever I get asked this question, I don't know if everyone is the same, but you tend to have one continuous person who's always there, and you tend to mix it up a bit with others. So the one who pops up quite a lot for me is Freddie Mercury, of Queen. So we were brought up on a diet of Queen, Elton John, Meatloaf, the Beatles, all those sorts of things. But out of those, I'd probably pick Freddie Mercury, I think. The other people who come up on a regular basis is Pink, the singer. So I don't know if we'll be familiar with her, but I've been to watch her play in concert, and she's phenomenal, but also quite a feisty character. So I'd be interested to see what she's got to say. And then probably need a bit of comedy. So someone like Dawn French, I think, could be quite good value. Or Jennifer Saunders. I'm not too sure which one. I'll say Dawn.
You can have them both. They can come as a pair.
Come as a pair. Okay, yeah.
You're just gonna have to make lay one extra plate.
Yeah, okay. They can share the meal.
Lydia, when you were even now, have you got a nickname? What was your nickname in the dressing room?
I was one of these players who didn't really have one. So it was either Lid or Lids. But then towards the back end of my career, my teammates, especially Heather Knight, took great joy in calling me Linda, because we were playing out in New Zealand at Lincoln University, which is the equivalent of Loughborough, really. And so they didn't have massive technical facilities, and they generally got random people in to do the broadcasting and the announcing. And so every time I went out to bat, I was Lydia Greenway. And so that nickname of Linda has stuck. So Linda, or just normal Liz or Lids.
Well, unbeknown to you, Heather Knight's written Linda the movie. Who's going to play you in Linda the movie?
What was that?
Who's going to play you? Heather Knight's written the movie Linda, and it's all about your life. Which actor is going to play you in that movie?
Oh gosh, I've got to think of some actors now. Maybe Sandra Bullock, because I think when she's been in films, she's quite she's not too much of a serious actor. So hopefully the less serious side will come through. So I go for her, I think.
Okay.
She's done a few good films.
She'll have to learn to play cricket, but that apart from, I'm sure she can do that. What's the last? Are you a nervous kind of person? What's the last time you can remember feeling really nervous? Has the transition into the broadcasting side of things been out of your comfort zone and giving you some butterflies? Or is there another time?
Oh yeah, all the time. I was nervous yesterday. I was covering England's game, and yeah, you just get nervous because the interesting thing is after you've worked on a game from a broadcasting point of view, it's like playing. Like if you've had an absolute shocker.
Yeah.
But similarly, you also know you think, oh, I actually think I've done quite well there today. So I think it's exactly the same. And like you say, it's being out of your comfort zone, I think, which creates those nerves, and especially when you're doing live TV as well. Like who knows what can happen. So yeah, definitely that would be the most recent time I've been nervous.
I was thinking when I've done a commentary or a radio show or something, or one of these, if you come off the back of it and think, I really enjoyed that, usually it means you've been okay. Whereas if you come off it and all you're thinking about is, I wish I hadn't said that, then that's not necessarily always a good sign.
It's human nature, isn't it?
Yeah. What is the top item on your bucket list? Things to do before you die. What would be the main thing that you'd like to get out of the way? Hopefully, you've got a few years yet before that has to happen. But
yeah, so Canada's on my hit list actually to travel to. So my grandma, who I was very close to, has got a sister out there. So they live on Vancouver Island. All my family have been. My best friend, her mum is Canadian, so they go every year. But because of cricket, I've never been able to get over there. So I think a decent trip around Canada would definitely be on my bucket list. Has to be soon.
That's one thing David Gower said to me when he came on the podcast, was that he wanted to go to places that cricket didn't exist, because basically in his life he'd gone to all of the traditional cricketing countries, but he'd not seen other parts of the world.
Yeah, and places like South America as well. I think they'd be a lot of people do them as part of their traveling or gap years or whatever, if they're lucky enough to have one.
I always fancied Cuba for some reason.
Yeah.
Always looks nice and bright and cheerful. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is the Fonz. I don't know if you remember Happy Days, but Fonz was really cool. I don't know why I'm doing that, because I'm not cool at all.
The Fonz,
so the Fonz is 10 on the scale. 1 is not cool at all. 1's more me. Where would you be on that scale?
Definitely not the Fonz. Cool. I would probably be somewhere in the middle, and I'm okay with that. I'm not someone who, I don't think I try to be cool. So I'm okay with not being cool. So somewhere in between, that's absolutely fine with me.
Yeah, I've just outside now. I've transported it to South Africa. I've delivered you a time machine, and you can take it forwards, you can take it backwards, you can go anywhere. It doesn't have to be a cricketing answer at all. Where would you like to take that time machine?
The 60s.
Okay.
Definitely the 60s. Yeah. I'm really into music. And actually, Isha Gua, who's one of my good friends, got me into appreciating more diverse music. I remember when she first introduced me to the Kings of Leon, like before they were big. Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow, actually, they're pretty cool. But yeah, the 60s, I think because of the music that was out at the time and what was going on at the time, I think there was no technology, no phones. Life, I think, was a lot simpler. I'm sure if you were in the moment there's always issues. But without a doubt, I think I'd go back to the 60s.
I like that answer. If you could live anywhere in the world, you can have a second home anywhere in the world, where would you like me to stick it?
Oh, good question. I think I would go with, only because I've lived out there. I've done 2 seasons out there, but Sydney in Australia, I think, because I've got a lot of good friends out there. So to be able to obviously have a good base there would be great, and obviously with the lifestyle and the cricket as well, I think it would be a good place to be based.
If you could change one thing about yourself, what would you change?
Oh gosh, what would it be? I'm a bit of a worrier. I think I worry too much. So I think I'd probably would like to. I don't know if worry is the right word, but going back to what we spoke about earlier, when you reflect on, say, a day's commentating, I think I nitpick a bit, and I think it's people who just let go of things and move on quickly. I think that is definitely the way to go. So I think I'd prefer to try and get towards that than over analyzing things.
Yeah, I overthink stuff, and I don't know about you, but when you get off the back of this podcast, say we might get 100 people saying that was really good, and then one person says, "Me, didn't like that," and you were that's the one thing you'd remember.
Oh, honestly, Twitter, that is the worst. When I go on Twitter, I don't really go on social media much because, firstly, I'm not consistent enough, and secondly, when people say nice things about you, I feel bad if I don't reply to everyone. So then my policy is if I don't reply to anyone, then at least I'm not making people feel bad, and I also don't engage with anyone who doesn't say so nice things. But Twitter, going back to your point, you're so right. If you get 10 nice things said about you and there's that one that is not nice, that's the one that you remember, which is ridiculous, really.
Yeah, it's bad, isn't it? But I think a lot of people are guilty of that, and those negative things fester with you a lot longer.
Yeah, they do.
Lydia Greenway, what will you be doing in 10 years' time?
Oh gosh, good question. I'd like to think I'd still be doing what I'm doing now, to be honest. Commentating, I love it. I love trying to be better at something. Very new to it still in comparison to other people. So I definitely like to still be doing that. Definitely like to still be helping the grassroots game if I can. Working in schools and in clubs. And yeah, I guess I'm pretty happy with where I am now. So I think if that can keep going, then that would be great. I don't think I'd be looking to change anything too drastically in 10 years' time, but who knows?
And where will the women's game be by then? Because it's gone on a pace, hasn't it, over the last 10 years? So another 10 years, hopefully it'll be even stronger.
Yeah, I feel like the women's game at the moment is playing catch up with itself because of the sheer numbers that have now come into the game. Obviously, there's more women and girls playing. So I think there's just a bit of catching up to do. So I think we need more female coaches in the game. I think we need better structures underneath the international game. That's the one thing, I've already mentioned it, but the one thing I think needs to be prioritised. So 10 years' time, I think that will be important.
Your book, Women and Girls Cricket, How Can We Grow the Game Together? Why should somebody buy that? Give it a plug.
Oh, gosh. Well, I've got a copy here, so I can show you the front cover. There it is. I didn't pick that picture, but there we go. Why would someone buy it? I think it's a guide really for people who want to help in some way in the women and girls game. So my one hope of what it offers is just practical advice for people in clubs and in schools of the best way of delivering a cricket programme, for example, but also for players and parents. So for parents, I think what we're seeing now is young girls are getting into the game via different routes. So it isn't the male relative now. So therefore, there's parents of young girls playing the game and the parents have no idea about the game of cricket. So when it comes to buying equipment, when it comes to maybe how they talk to their daughter, the best way of helping to develop them. And also we've had some really good contributors to the book as well, so past and present players. So it's not all just me. So that's probably its biggest selling point, to be honest, is the other people we've got involved in the book. So yeah.
You mentioned the infrastructure kind of stuff about women's cricket. I remember somebody saying to me about the hockey. England won the World Cup hockey, and then a load of girls descended, or a load of people descended on hockey clubs, and they just didn't have the capacity to cope with the added numbers. They didn't have enough sticks, they didn't have enough bags, they didn't have enough goals, or whatever. Is cricket in that kind of situation? Then there's the demand for it, but not necessarily the coaching, the facilities to cope with that.
Yeah, definitely. And that is something we touch on in the book, is how do you share and manage the facilities equally? So, for example, I've been into schools, and the posh schools, but do work in state schools. But often at those schools, the teachers there are proud to tell you that the women or the girls are allowed to play on the main square once a year. Like, they're proud to say that. And I'm like, once a year? Are you serious? Like, it should be, people should be striving to find a way where there's equality. And so I think there is definitely that playing of catch up. And I think equipment's a big one. So I run an online store as well, and we just offer equipment which is suitable for females, because that is also a challenge. Clubs don't necessarily know what equipment, firstly, I guess, why is the equipment different as well? So there are small differences. So yeah, because there's suddenly been this big influx, I do think there is an element of catch up and, okay, what do we need to have in place for the females?
I was the media manager at Yorkshire Cricket in the late noughties, and I tried to get double headers. I was kind of going for double headers where the women played before the T20 Blast games, and it never happened at the time. But obviously now they are doing, aren't they? We got the 100 coming in. I'm not a big fan of the 100, Lydia, but I'm a big fan of the fact that the women. I'm a big fan of the fact that the women's game's getting the exposure. That's the one good thing for me, and it's having a real impact, isn't it, on young girls?
Yeah, it's massive. And yeah, you're exactly right. I can't tell you how many people have said exactly what you've just said. It's been a massive boost for the women's game. And I think maybe that's what we should focus on, rather than it being judged on what it's doing for the men's game. Actually, let's, see how well it's going for the women's game, which is obviously just as important.
The last question of the podcast, and thank you very much indeed for coming on today. Enjoy the rest of your time in South Africa. I'm sure you will, because it's a wonderful country to be in. But if you'd been me today and you'd been asking you the questions, is there anything you'd have asked to get an exclusive and great and interesting answer? Have I missed anything that could have really pushed your buttons?
No, I think you've done a great job. What would have pushed my buttons? Actually, do you know what? One thing which I don't think is spoken about enough in cricket, but also in general, is, and this is a bit niche, but subconscious bias within not just sport, but outside of sport. And I guess we can make it relevant to cricket. But I just think subconscious bias plays such a big part in the way that the game grows, and the experiences that people have, good and bad. So yeah, and it's sort of quite a vague thing to say, but subconscious bias for me is quite a big factor in the good and the bad stuff that happens in the game of cricket.
I've done quite a bit of work around the Yorkshire racism stuff and Azim and what have you, and the obviously conscious bias and unconscious bias in the kind of equality field, whether it's race, women, or whatever, is a big thing, isn't it? I don't know if you've seen the Crawley town manager, the 18-month ban that he's got. There was an article I read last night, I think it was, where there's a list of about 20 different racist things he said, and then the FA say that isn't, it was unconscious bias, he's not a racist. And you're thinking, well, how can you say all of those things on a regular basis to the black players in your dressing room and actually not be a racist of some kind? You have to be, haven't you? It's not, that doesn't happen by accident. But the same will happen with young girls and with females in cricket.
Yeah, and I think the unconscious and the subconscious bias is the most dangerous one, I think, because people at the top are making decisions that they think are really good decisions, but they're often only good decisions for certain people. And so that's something that, if people are more aware of their thinking and why they think the way that they do, then I think we can get a lot further in what everyone's trying to do, which is just making it a bit more equal for everyone. So yeah,
well, it goes back to what you were saying about the housemaster or whatever, saying, "Oh, the girls are allowed to play on there one day a year." Yeah, they think
and
that's
being
great.
really proud of it.
Yeah, and it's not great, is it? Because they should be on there more. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly that. Yeah, that's a good definitely a great example, I think. So yeah, hopefully that will change.
Hopefully that will change. Lydia, thank you very much indeed for coming on today. It's been a pleasure to meet you and to talk to you. And as I say, enjoy the rest of your time in South Africa. And the book, Women and Girls Cricket, How We Can Grow the Game Together, available. I know it's available on Amazon. Is it available elsewhere, or is that just the...
So it's available at Waterstones and also the Female Cricket Store, which is the online store that I run. So yeah, available there as well.
Well, Cricket Badgers out there, buy it, and read it and devour it. Lydia, thank you again. Thanks everybody out there for watching and listening to the Cricket Badger podcast. I think we're back next week. I'm just trying to sort out something with Roland Butcher to come on next week and to talk about his life and times in the game as well. But I don't know what day that's going to be next week, but it will be, I hope, at some stage next week. But I will see you again very soon indeed. Cheers, everybody.